Well, hello everybody, welcome back. I want to make sure you get Chief Lappa wins in on this. My name's Sam Azer. I thought I'd make a part two. I was talking about the anti-gravity machine last time. I wanted to kind of elaborate a little bit more. I wanted to mention some names. That was part of it, but part two of this, I wanted to kind of say how I went from gravity to fusion, you know, with Tesla coils, trying to discharge it into, well, heavy water, deuterated water. But so I just want to come back and let's go back to gravity. Let's go back to gravity. Coming over to this doohickey. Now, just to talk about some components. Maybe I'll take my head off. Here, let me put it a little closer here to look at some things. You know, that center block, I actually had somebody from New York, I think it was W.M. Berg, back in whatever, 2000, no, in 1999, somewhere around that. It was a while ago, though, 2006, 7, that was the fusion idea. But before I get to that, I had somebody machine this block so I can put these bearings that I had pressed in. I forgot the dimensions here, it looks like 2-inch diameter. And then I had these shafts, you know, I had these things made up, you know, they would plug in there. Then again, there was a wooden box that went around this whole thing. Now imagine, you know, I used hardwood, solid hardwood, metal corners, you know, blah, blah, blah. But, it went on to a piece of wood, and then this was bolted onto that wood, and this would hold the flange. This flange here would then hold the shaft of the routers. Wood routers that spun at 25,000 revolutions per minute. So W.M. Berg, I had them do this. A friend of mine, Larry Salter, we made all these stainless steel, we machined them, you know, I got blocks and we machined these. I had a welder, look at the weld on that. Is this thing still on here? Oh, there it is. Yep. Just look at that weld. It's a nice weld, isn't it? You know, I forgot the gentleman's name. When I lived on Bethlehem Road in Catasauqua, he was down the street in the corner. He left 10 years ago. I forgot his name, but he did an outstanding job. He welded that on for me. Nice, clean work. And this whole shaft, I actually had, I think it was W.M. Berg did this. Oh, no, or maybe with Larry. I don't remember. I really don't. It's a solid piece of steel, and we just machined it as one all the way in, and it would have went, you know, inside to that. Okay, here was an older version. I actually had it drilled out and we tapped and threaded, and it was, I don't know, it was earlier design. It didn't hold up too well. And well, Larry, my good buddy, he was a great machinist. He had a CNC, a small one, and a lathe in his basement, and we did all that. You know, that's the weld. He wasn't a welder, but he did a good job and he had that on. But I just want to mention Larry's name because he's up there in heaven watching what's going on. But you know, and to go to gravity, that took a while. You know, I used to play with a lot of electric field, magnetic field, multiple things before I came up with the gyroscope. But anyway, you know, going to fusion, well, let's just talk about the electric field really when you go into trying to talk about nuclear fusion and the way that I was going after it. Well, electricity, a charged particle, and you push it in motion, you could do things with it. You could store it in capacitors such as this. You know, these things were tied in parallel. That was a capacitor, and that was strapped. It went to a primary of a coil, which would be like an inductor. You know, these terminals here, this thing would go around a Tesla coil. I'll show you the Tesla coil, but that's the primary. You could call that L, the inductor, and C, the capacitor, and it's a ringing circuit. Those who know anything about resonance or trying to oscillate something, resonance would be like, you know, trying to match the proper energy to anything, any spring mass system, such as somebody on a swing, and you want to push them properly, a function of the spring, a function of the weight, the mass, and, you know, you find that perfect timing to push somebody, you know, matching resonance. Or the classical example of a wine glass, and you have an auditory frequency, and it could be a special frequency, you know, which matches only the structural shape of the wine glass, and it could shatter it, you know, resonance. But before we get to resonance and something oscillating, let's just talk about the electric field itself, which is a charged particle. If you push it in motion, you know, you'll get something out of it. This telephone pole here and that wire here coming off the street Most electricity in the residential neighborhoods around 30,000 volts. You know, they try to push it around because when you have higher voltage, you can use less current, amperage. You don't have to use as big as a fat wire to move it through, because that's where the frictional loss comes in. So it's around 30,000 volts up there, and then it goes into something like that called a transformer. Nikola Tesla put some patents on that. That there is a transformer transforming 30,000 volts to around 220 volts, 220 for a house. If you ground it in the middle, that's why you get 120 to ground. You get 120 volts, and that ground strapped, and every telephone pole will have a ground wire going down. This one has a guy wire holding it, so that uses the ground, that ground wire, and that's staked into the ground. Earth is always, you got to make it relative to something, to electricity. So, you know, there's 60 hertz they use in America, the oscillation 60 times a second, because if you go to the generating factory plant and the big motors that are turning, whether it's by steam or by water, they found that the best mechanical operating speed, you know, I think it was around 3,600 revolutions per minute. That breaks down to 60 hertz. Anyway, you're oscillating something at 60 hertz. And then America, we could get away with going, splitting 220. We can have something 120 to ground, a little bit safer. Out there in Europe and other places, they got 50 hertz, and that frequency does something else, but they have to use 220 to everything. A little bit more dangerous, you gotta watch out. So the electric field, which is a wave, you know, a wave, you're down at the beach and a wave comes and hits you, it's got power to it. You know, that's a big example, but the electrical wave is the same thing. There's an electric field, magnetic field component to any charged particle moving. So that wire up there is 30,000 volts average relative to ground. And then again, it bumps it down to just 220 volts on the secondary. Well, you could take that same transformer like I did. It's called a pole pig. That's like a nickname in the electrical industry for linemen. I forgot the guy's name. He was famous for Tesla coils in the early 2000s on the internet. I got it off him out in Wisconsin. It came in on a tractor trailer down to 7th and Hamilton Street in Allentown. I took it up there and worked on it, you know, did the experiment in 2007, Tesla coil, and it's still there. You know, that was the first big building to get knocked down in Allentown. They start putting high rises up. So anyway, that's where that, I don't have that anymore, but I still have, when I put 220 into it, again, you'll get 30,000 volts out of it. And that 30,000 volts, I rang it in a spark gap system, you know, using this LC, inductor capacitor ringing circuit, and then it was around a Tesla coil. And a Tesla coil, well, let's go back to the straight wire, just a regular wire. Here they're forcing something going back and forth 60 hertz, but whatever, you're moving a piece of wire. And in the early days of playing with it, such as Michael Faraday in the early 1800s, you know, that's when they were studying these properties. You know, you could accelerate it, do things, or wind it up, and they figured out an electromagnet and all these other sorts of things. You know, you're playing with frequencies. And the thing about a Tesla coil, and what I'm after is resonance. So taking this ideology of the electric field and such, and you can oscillate it at frequencies, and that apparatus, a Tesla coil, what it can give you, you can take the primary coil I had around there, and you can wrap it around. This is the Tesla coil right up here mounted. This thing used to go around 800,000 volts, but again, Michael Faraday, one little piece of wire, you know, that's how it starts, one piece of wire, and you can wind it up. Well, that's kind of like just making a magnifier out of it, but that with the primary around it, you know, and other little things. And again, I use a spark gap discharge, but you could use modern day, you know, there's IGBT's high silicone, high amperage rating. You can control it with frequency, a driver. You could probably do multiple things and find the tuning. So what was I after? Okay, so a tank of water, which I showed in the other video, or let's just say you have a tank of water. Let's talk about water, pure water. Pure water, if you can imagine yourself being the oxygen, because water is H2O. Imagine you're holding out in your hands at about 120 degrees, whatever. You know, there's a certain angle to standard water. You know, H2O, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. But if you know this, about 1 in every 6,000 molecules of water, 1 in every 6,000 approximately, that hydrogen does not even have a neutron attached to it, and that would be called a deuteron if it was. So the majority of it are just bare naked protons. But America does have an abundance of heavy water, meaning all the water, they already filtered it via distillation and other processes to get just simply H2HDO. You know, D is for the deuteron, that it's it looks just like regular water, has a higher different characteristics such as boiling point and other things, but fact is it has a neutron attached to it. So here you are, imagine your H2O, but it's actually HDO, you know, I mean, it's a deuteron, and you're going to subject it with an electric field of a certain frequency. Frequency meaning you're just controlling the oscillation of an electric field, which will, at such high voltage, you know, it's going to bust an arc, lightning voltages. Everything inside it is going to be stripped of the covalent electrons, the hydrogen, and even all of the 8 electrons around an oxygen atom. And those who know nuclear physics, in the core of an oxygen atom, it's already a magic shell proton, the nucleus. It's already, meaning like the Nobel gases for the covalent electrons. There's certain, in the periodic table, you know, there's Nobel gas atoms. They don't interact with anything. They're always by themselves. Very hard to get it to bond with anything. It doesn't want to bond to anything. You know, it's a Nobel gas atom, they're called. Nobel doesn't want to, it likes the way it is. It's perfectly matched and balanced electrically from the electrons on the outside to the protons on the inside. Well, the nucleus is the same way in regards to the protons and neutrons, and oxygen's one of them. Well, below that, I mean, again, H2O or H2O is hydrogen. And the next step up, you want to cause fusion, which is the easiest in the elements, according to nuclear physics. It wants to go to helium, which again is the first one, a magic shell number. It wants to go to helium. 2 deuterons, they want to go to helium. If you could get it there, if you could finesse it there, it'll go there and it'll give off some excess energy. That's what fusion's all about. And they're trying to do it in these Russian designs. Whatever, I'm not here to talk about tokamaks. They've been doing it for 80 years. It's not going anywhere. This thing on the surface looks like it's cold fusion. In the old days, in the 90s, there's some 2 guys, Pons and Fleischmann, they thought, you know, it looked like a tank of water and they're putting electricity, but their idea was using palladium electrodes, let's just say a catalytic converter, catalyst. They're trying to do something to cause fusion. I'm not coming anywhere near this, I'm not talking about that. I come from left field chasing gravity, and I'm talking about extreme high voltages, well, enough activation energy that if you have 2 things that want to come together, whether even next door molecules and everything's pretty much stripped and disassociated at that moment of such high voltages moving across these charged particles, but there's going to be a resonance, there's going to be a point called the Bennett pinch, they're going to want to come together. So, I mean, that's the premise of what I'm trying to do. It looks like cold fusion on the surface, but it's not. It's hot fusion. It's a combination of established nuclear physics in regards to the Bennett pinch. You know, I'm not going to elaborate on some things. Those who know nuclear physics just knows the terminologies, but in essence, that's what it's about. You know, could it be obviously modified in so many factors? You know, I'm just giving the simplicity of it. Gravity to fusion. Wanted to mention some names that were part of the gravity part, but in regards to building the Tesla coil and all that other stuff, well, the gravity, that's over. That's 25 years. I was 35 at the time. You know, and then I went on the fusion, finally ended up building it. You know, everything I did on my own, I mean, hand building it and such, and testing it. And that came out around 2007. It's coming close to, you know, it's 18 years, coming close to 20 years. But that's the idea. So just like the gravity idea, I went so far, and if somebody could do something with it, or maybe whatever, maybe it'll help, it'll, you know, go somewhere with anti-gravity, you know, because all that alien reverse engineering mumbo jumbo, that's all mumbo jumbo, you know. So anyway, you know, this is part 2 of something called about gravity. I kind of explained it, how you can maybe a possibility how to control it, you know, manipulate it. That's gravity, fusion, a little tank next to it with the electrodes going through. I was oscillating a Tesla coil. High electric fields around 150 kilohertz, you know, but these numbers, they can be found via testing. I'm trying to establish resonance with a high, strong electric field to disassociate all the covalent electrons, which aids in the pinch. Draw a 3-body diagram of what's going on within it. The tank is filled Pressurized water reactors are already existing. Heavy fuel is already there. A large company that already in the fission industry should just really retrofit one of their tanks laying around somewhere and just do this. I tried saying this a few times on the internet after the experiment, trying to provoke people to try it. I don't know, it didn't go nowhere. That's probably my ability. I just didn't convey it good enough. Probably, obviously, or whatever, maybe not. I don't know, things take time. Either way, someday it's going to be confirmed, someday it's going to be tested. I'm just here to say, in regards to gravity, well, if you repeat it, it's successful. I did that first, 1999. Fusion, 2006-7, I busted that arc with that ideology for fusion. If that ever comes about and beats this, it solves this whole fusion energy idea, I did the best I can. I can only yell and scream so much on the internet, and I pretty much tired down from doing that. But I made a little video trying to talk about some things. Well, you know, that's about how, look at me, how lucky I am. So 30,000 volts coming in off this transformer. I wanted to mention these three. Happen to live right next door to three large electric lines coming in. See, when they're this tall and they go up that high, well, that's trying to tell you, you know, you can't get too close to those wires because you don't actually have to touch it. It'll come and touch you a little bit. But so when you push things across the country from the generating station, after they bump it up even, that's probably 300 to 500,000 volts. You know, do it from some coal power plant or somewhere up far. You follow the lines, you know, look on MapQuest or whatever it is out there, and you'll follow, you know, where they make it and they push it in. But then when you come into the towns and the cities, you have to drop it down and it's street level for people. And, you know, so there it is up there around 30,000 volts. You got 3-phase up top there. I'm using 1-phase. This is all 60 hertz. It's for what we got to do in the electrical world we developed here in America and other places at 60. I'm talking about a Tesla coil. I'm talking about trying to manipulate high voltages with resonance techniques upon the liquid state, which can be pressurized and controlled, of deuterated water. America's already made a big abundance of it. I think it should be tested. I did what I can as a solo guy, built this stuff, came up with the idea, and if it's true, well, Sam Azer, I'm the guy who did it first time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And whoever's out there can take it to the next level. Good luck. Thank you very much.